DVassist acknowledges the traditional custodians throughout Western Australia and their continuing connection to the land, waters and community. We pay our respects to all members of Aboriginal communities and their cultures, and to the elders both past and present. This webinar was recorded on Whadjuk Noongar land. If a woman is planning to leave their violent partner, can they contact you for advice about family law, children and property? I know you touched on a few of those, but in particular around property, perhaps.
So property is the way that we provide service around property is, unfortunately, we don't provide ongoing assistance for property matters at this stage. But we do have a property clinic that runs every fortnight, which is staffed by volunteer lawyers. So if someone does have a property law matter and they need advice on that, I may, if I've spoken to the client for the advice about children or about the restraining order, I may then refer that client to the clinic, and our admin then book that client in with one of our volunteer lawyers for a one-off advice session about property.
Great. So at that session, if they do need ongoing support, it's just providing those options for the person to seek. Is that right?
Yeah, unfortunately, property law assistance is quite limited in the sector at the moment. It's something we're very, very aware of, that just because there may be money in a house once that's sold, or there, it doesn't mean that there's means for mum to pay a private lawyer. So we try and fill that need with our volunteer property clinic. But in terms of ongoing assistance for property matters, unfortunately, that is one area that we can't provide at this time. But sometimes it's really just getting the initial advice about what the stages of a property matter are, and getting a picture of what the pool, the property pool, or what the split may look like, can at least give women that first step and that bit of context for what might be to come.
That's very helpful, very helpful. Okay, so the next question is, why is it important for women to have some legal advice so that they can make appropriate decisions when leaving a violent relationship?
Look, there's a lot of reasons, and I mean, it's something that we hear very commonly from our clients is that without information about your rights and your options, it can be very easy to feel overwhelmed. It can also be very easy to have that sometimes manipulated by a perpetrator to make women feel like they don't have any choice and they need to stay in the relationship that's unsafe for them. And really, information just gives you choice, and choice gives you immense power. So that is something that we hear very frequently from our clients, where they may have been told by the perpetrator that if you leave, I'll take the children off you, or if you leave, I'll have you deported. If you leave, then I'll get the house and you'll have nothing. And it's very understandable why, without legal advice and understanding the process, that can feel very, very real and very overwhelming. So the most important thing about advice is that it gives women a clear idea of their own options and their own control of a situation, and really start to take that power and that autonomy back to themselves, which we know that in many relationships of violence or control it can be really, really damaged. So it is really the first building block of making decisions for yourself. And the most important and immediate factor in that is really around safety. So if you can get urgent advice about perhaps a restraining order, or if the other party has withheld the children and refusing to return them to a mother who's had care of the children, there are options. There are legal options for you to access, and getting information about that and acting on those things is really, really important.
I love how you said earlier, just information provides more control and power for the individual to make those choices and to know their rights. And I think you make a good point, particularly around financial abuse and visa abuse, where that misinformation is kind of used as a fear control tactic. So yeah, I just think that there's many pathways to the service, and I think that's really great. For that initial advice is just so key in
in what might be a decision or just informed choice going forward. Okay, so you've mentioned that you represent people experiencing violence in court. We know that's not with property, but that's primarily with family and children matters on a case-by-case basis. Is that right?
Yeah, we always look at the client as a whole person rather than just the legal issue that she's presenting with. And we know that there are some women two women may have identical legal issues, but one may have additional vulnerabilities that make her navigating that process, engaging with that process, or even accessing it at all, completely out of reach, or there may be those extra barriers. So we do provide that ongoing support to women who have those additional vulnerabilities. That's not to say that one person's experience of violence is any harder or easier than anybody else's, but we really do look at the barriers to accessing the justice system as well, and where there are those additional barriers, that's where we really try and focus our ongoing representation capacity. You know, we are statewide, and there's statistically a huge number of women experiencing violence in relationships. And we really try and be as responsive and accessible for as many women as possible. But also we look at, you know, those women who really can't access another service or who can't access assistance privately. And we also look at the legal issues, so not just the black and white, you know, legal problem, as it were, but also the legal issues that may be impacting, the other issues that may be impacting on the legal issues. So if that's homelessness, or if that's, you know, language or literacy barriers, and really try and focus our representation part of the program, the organisation on those women. And again, for women who fall outside of those, you know, those boundaries, we also do try and make referrals wherever we possibly can to link her up with another support. Assessing our ongoing support, we also look at the likelihood of success, you know, or making sure that what the client is wanting to achieve in her court outcome, that she has really clear advice about what's possible, what's unlikely, and what her options really are, so that we're really targeting our support at getting her to where she needs to go, but without, you know, making applications to court that are not going to further what goals that she's wanting to achieve. So those are conversations that are had ongoing with the lawyers and clients as we move through the process, to make sure that everybody's really clear about what needs to be achieved and what needs to happen for that to be achieved.
That's really important, and I'm really glad you mentioned that, because it really just highlights that trauma-informed process again, doesn't it? To say we know that going through court is very stressful, so it's of course working through that and seeing what are the chances and the outcomes for the best interests of the client. So I can really see there's a lot of thought and analysis that goes into this as a team. Is there a dedicated team or lawyer that actually specialises in family and domestic violence matters, or is it all the lawyers there?
All of our lawyers work with people who have experienced family violence or are experiencing family violence. It's unfortunately not, there's no way to carve out a family violence team for our organisation, just because an overwhelming majority of women who contact us are having or have had that experience. And I think it's also important to underline that someone who's experienced violence in the past may have been in a previous relationship, or even as a younger person. The impact of that violence doesn't necessarily end when the relationship does, or when circumstances change. That the impact of that can be carried lifelong. And so we're all the staff are very aware of that. And as I said, we do operate a trauma-informed practice, which means that all of our staff receive specialist training about working with people who have had traumatic experiences, or who are living through a traumatic experience, to make sure that every member of our staff is responsive and is appropriately trained to support women when they come to us. So it's really everybody.
Wonderful. I think that's really great. That concludes our frequently asked questions, but is there anything that you'd like to add to this section?
I think just to emphasise that getting advice is really important, whether that's before you sign any paperwork from the Department of Communities, whether you sign an agreement about a restraining order, whether you're signing a parenting plan for arrangements for children, even in circumstances where family violence may not be the concern in your matter, but getting advice before you agree to a particular course of action, I think, is really important for anybody, because there are certainly women we speak to who, with that information about their obligations, their rights and their options, make really, really different choices that they didn't know were on the table before getting that advice. So no matter which area you may be needing assistance with, whether it's through us or another service, just getting advice about that process and the impact of those decisions is really, really important.
Thank you so much, Anna. This has been really valuable. And as we said at the start of the webinar, it provides more of an insight into what the process looks like. And so that, when we might make that call, we're a bit more informed and how someone can support us in this journey. So thank you so much for your time and what you do at the Women's Legal Service WA.
No problem. Thanks very much.